The transport ship's cargo bay stank of fear and despair. Zara pressed herself against the cold metal wall, her blue-tinted skin almost glowing in the dim light. Her large violet eyes darted around the cramped space filled with other captured beings from across the galaxy. The Vorthak slavers had been collecting specimens for weeks, and she was their newest prize from the peaceful world of Lyrian Prime. The rough metal collar around her neck felt heavier with each passing hour. It was designed to suppress her natural telepathic abilities, leaving her feeling hollow and disconnected from the mental harmonies that had always been part of her existence. The other slaves whispered in dozens of different languages, creating a symphony of suffering that made her heart ache. Fresh meat for the human sector, one of the Vorthak guards growled as he stomped through the cargo hold, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a grin among his species. The humans pay well for exotic companions. This blue-skinned beauty should fetch a good price. Zara shuddered at his words. She had heard stories about humans during her education on Lyrian Prime. They were supposed to be primitive warriors who had somehow stumbled into space travel. Her people considered them dangerous and unpredictable, a species that solved problems with violence rather than wisdom. The thought of being owned by one filled her with terror. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the small porthole, Zara could see a blue and green world that looked surprisingly similar to her home planet. The sight made her chest tighten with homesickness. She wondered if she would ever see the crystal cities of Lyrian Prime again, or feel the warm purple glow of her twin suns on her face. "Prepare for auction," the guard announced, and several slaves began to weep openly. The auction house on the human colony world of New Geneva was nothing like what Zara had expected. Instead of a crude marketplace, it was a sophisticated facility, with holographic displays and automated bidding systems. Humans in expensive clothing sat in climate-controlled booths, examining the merchandise with cold efficiency. When Zara's turn came, she was pushed onto a raised platform under bright lights. The auctioneer, a thin human with gray hair, began listing her attributes like she was a piece of machinery. Her education level, her species' natural empathic abilities, her age and health status. Each word felt like a knife cutting away pieces of her identity. The bidding started slowly but picked up momentum as several buyers showed interest. Zara tried to make herself smaller, hoping to appear less appealing, but it seemed to have the opposite effect. The humans seemed to find her fear endearing rather than off-putting. In the back of the auction house, a man sat alone in a simple booth. Unlike the other buyers, he wasn't examining her with hungry eyes or calculating her monetary value. Instead, he looked sad and uncomfortable, as if he didn't want to be there at all. His brown hair was unkempt and his clothes were practical rather than fashionable. When their eyes met for a brief moment, Zara saw something unexpected: compassion. The final bid came from the man in the back. He had quietly outbid everyone else without any of the dramatic gestures the other buyers had made. As the gavel fell, sealing her fate, Zara felt a mixture of relief and terror. At least her new owner didn't look cruel, but she still had no idea what he planned to do with her. The processing took another hour. Papers were signed, credits transferred, and ownership officially changed hands. Zara was given a small bag containing the few personal items she had been allowed to keep from her home world: a small crystal pendant and a data pad with pictures of her family. Her new owner approached her cautiously, as if he was afraid of frightening her further. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said in a gentle voice. "I know this must be terrifying for you, but I want you to know that I have no intention of mistreating you." Zara remained silent, unsure how to respond. Every instinct told her not to trust him, but his tone was different from everyone else she had encountered since her capture. He wasn't speaking to her like she was property. "Do you understand English?" Marcus asked. When she nodded, he continued, "Good. We have a long journey ahead of us. My home is on the frontier. About 3 days by passenger transport. Are you hungry? Thirsty?" The kindness in his voice almost broke through her defenses, but Zara forced herself to remain guarded. This could be a trick, a way to make her compliant before revealing his true intentions. She had heard stories about humans who pretended to be kind before showing their violent nature. The transport ship was clean and comfortable, nothing like the slave vessel that had brought her here. Marcus had booked separate cabins and made sure she had access to food that was compatible with her physiology. He didn't try to force conversation or demand her attention. Instead, He gave her space to process what had happened to her. On the second day of travel, Zara finally spoke to him. "Why did you buy me?" she asked, the words coming out more accusatory than she had intended. Marcus looked up from the book he was reading, an actual paper book, which seemed oddly primitive for someone who could afford to buy slaves. "Because if I hadn't, someone else would have," he said simply. "And I know what most of those other buyers were planning." His honesty surprised her. She had expected lies or evasions, not this straightforward admission. "What do you plan to do with me?" "I haven't decided yet," Marcus admitted. "I live alone on a farming colony. It's hard work and I could use help, but I won't force you to do anything you don't want to do. The collar will come off as soon as we reach my home. After that, what happens next is partly up to you." Zara stared at him in disbelief. No owner would willingly remove a control collar from their slave. It was unthinkable. Either he was lying, or he was unlike any human she had been told about. As the transport ship continued toward the frontier world that would be her new home, Zara found herself cautiously hopeful for the first time since her capture. Maybe, just maybe, her fate wouldn't be as terrible as she had feared. Marcus Chen's farm stretched across rolling hills under a pale yellow sun. The landscape was dotted with fields of grain that swayed gently in the warm breeze, and in the distance, Zara could see a small cluster of buildings that would be her new home. The simplicity of it all surprised her. She had expected something more imposing from a human wealthy enough to purchase slaves. The farmhouse was modest but well-maintained, built from local stone and wood. Solar panels glinted on the roof, and a small garden flourished near the front porch. It looked peaceful, almost welcoming, which only made Zara more suspicious. Nothing in her life had been this pleasant since her capture. "Home sweet home," Marcus said as they approached the main building. He carried her small bag of belongings without being asked, another gesture that confused her understanding of human behavior. Masters didn't carry things for their slaves. Inside, the house was comfortable but not luxurious. The furniture was practical, the walls lined with books and what appeared to be scientific equipment. Through a window, Zara could see more fields and a barn where several four-legged creatures grazed peacefully. Marcus set her bag on a table and turned to face her. "Before we go any further, let's get that collar off you." Zara instinctively stepped backward, her hand moving to the metal band around her neck. "You cannot remove it without the proper codes," she said. "The Vorthak would not give them to you." "The Vorthak sell a lot of slaves to humans," Marcus replied, walking to a cabinet and retrieving a small electronic device. "We've had plenty of time to figure out how their collars work. This might sting a little." He approached her slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted to. When she remained still, frozen between fear and hope, he carefully positioned the device against the collar's locking mechanism. There was a brief flash of light and a sharp pain that made her gasp. Then the weight around her neck was gone. The moment the collar hit the floor, Zara's empathic abilities flooded back to her. The sudden return of her natural senses was overwhelming. She could feel Marcus's emotions like a warm current in the air. What she sensed made her stumble backward in shock. There was no cruelty in him, no hidden malice or violent intent. Instead, she felt guilt, sadness, and a deep loneliness that reminded her of her own homesickness. He genuinely regretted that she had been taken from her home, and he was struggling with the moral complexity of his decision to buy her. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked, reaching out to steady her. "I can feel your thoughts," she whispered, still adjusting to the return of her abilities. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Violence. Cruelty. The stories my people tell about humans paint you as savage warriors who take what they want without regard for others." Marcus nodded sadly. "Some of us are exactly that, but not all of us, just like not all members of any species are the same." Over the next few days, Zara began to understand the rhythm of life on the farm. Marcus worked from sunrise to sunset, tending to his crops and animals with a dedication that reminded her of the farmers on Lyrian Prime. He never demanded that she help, but she found herself watching from a distance as he went about his tasks. The loneliness she had sensed in him became more apparent as she observed his daily routine. He ate his meals alone, worked alone, and spent his evenings reading or maintaining his equipment in solitude. The nearest neighbor was apparently several kilometers away, and the communication device in his home rarely chimed with incoming messages. "Why do you live alone?" she asked one evening as they ate dinner at opposite ends of his small kitchen table. He had insisted she take whatever food she wanted from his well-stocked pantries, another kindness that continued to surprise her. "It's complicated," Marcus replied, poking at the vegetables on his plate. "I came to this world to get away from people, I suppose. The colonies offer a chance to start over, to live life on your own terms. But you are lonely," she observed. Her empathic abilities made it impossible to miss the deep well of isolation that surrounded him. Marcus looked up at her, startled. "I forgot you could sense emotions. That must be disconcerting, knowing what everyone around you is feeling." "It can be, but it also helps me understand people better. You carry sadness like a weight. Something happened to you before you came here." For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his fork and met her eyes. "I lost my family in a raid on my home colony. Pirates attacked while the defense fleet was away. My wife and daughter were killed trying to evacuate civilians." The pain that accompanied his words hit Zara like a physical blow. She gasped and had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. The depth of his grief was staggering, a wound that had never properly healed. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I did not mean to intrude on such painful memories. It's not your fault. And honestly, it's been years since I've talked about it with anyone. Maybe it's time." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of shared sorrow hanging between them. Finally, Zara spoke again. "Is that why you bought me? Because you understood what it was like to lose everything?" Marcus nodded slowly. "When I saw you on that auction block, you reminded me of my daughter." She had the same look of terror and confusion. "I couldn't save her, but I thought maybe I could help you." The revelation struck Zara with unexpected force. She had spent days trying to understand his motivations, expecting to find selfish desires or hidden agendas. Instead, she had discovered a broken man trying to find meaning in an act of compassion. "You could have freed me immediately," she pointed out. "Given me passage back to my homeworld." "I tried to research it," Marcus admitted. "But Lyrian Prime is in Vorthak-controlled space now. They took over the system completely after the raids. There's nowhere safe for you to go back to." The news hit her like a physical blow. She had known her world was under attack when she was captured, but she had held on to hope that her people might have driven off the invaders. Learning that her entire civilization was now under alien control felt like losing her family all over again. "Then we are both refugees," she said quietly. "I suppose we are." That night, for the first time since her arrival, Zara didn't dream of escape or rescue. Instead, she found herself thinking about the sad, lonely man who had saved her from a fate worse than slavery and asked for nothing in return. Her empathic abilities told her that his offer of freedom was genuine. He truly would help her leave if she wanted to go. But where would she go? What life could she build as a refugee with no money, no connections, and no way to return home? As she lay in the comfortable bed he had given her, looking out at the alien stars through her window, Zara realized that for the first time in weeks, she felt safe. It was a strange feeling to have on a world so far from home, in the house of a species she had been taught to fear. But Marcus Chen had shown her a different side of humanity, one that chose compassion over conquest and healing over hatred. Maybe, she thought as sleep finally took her, there was more than one way to build a new life among the stars. 3 weeks had passed since Zara's arrival at the farm, and she had settled into an unexpected routine. Each morning she would wake before dawn and find Marcus already in the kitchen, preparing coffee and a simple breakfast. He never asked her to join him, but he always made enough food for 2 people and left a place setting across from his own. The work on the farm was more complex than she had initially realized. Marcus wasn't just growing basic crops. He was conducting agricultural experiments, testing new varieties of earth plants to see how they adapted to the local soil and climate. His small laboratory was filled with soil samples, plant specimens, and data terminals that recorded everything from nutrient levels to weather patterns. "You are a scientist," Zara observed one morning as she watched him carefully transplant seedlings in the greenhouse. She had been helping him with small tasks, partly out of boredom and partly because her empathic abilities made her acutely aware of how much the work meant to him. "I was," Marcus replied, not looking up from his delicate work. "Before I came here, I taught agricultural science at the university on New Shanghai. After what happened, I couldn't stand being around so many people anymore. But the work still calls to me." Zara studied the careful way he handled each plant, the precise measurements he took, the detailed notes he recorded in his journal. Your people speak of humans as warriors and conquerors, but you are trying to make things grow. Humans are complicated, Marcus said with a slight smile. We can be both destroyers and creators, sometimes in the same day. The trick is choosing which impulse to follow. As the days passed, Zara found herself drawn deeper into the rhythms of the farm. Her natural empathic abilities gave her an unusual connection to living things, and she discovered she could sense the health and needs of the plants in ways that amazed Marcus. When she mentioned that a particular section of wheat seemed stressed, he would test the soil and invariably find some imbalance that his instruments had missed. How do you do that? He asked one afternoon after she had correctly identified a fungal infection before any visible symptoms appeared. All living things have a kind of energy signature, she explained, running her blue-tinted fingers through the grain stalks. My people have been farmers for thousands of years before we reached the stars. We learned to listen to what the land tells us. Could you teach me? The question surprised her. In all the stories she had heard about humans, they were never portrayed as students, always as conquerors who imposed their will rather than learning from others. But Marcus looked at her with genuine curiosity and respect, waiting for her answer as if it mattered. I could try, she said carefully, but it requires a kind of mental discipline that might be difficult for your species. I'm willing to learn if you're willing to teach. Their first lesson took place in the early morning. When the dew was still heavy on the plants and the air was cool and still, Zara had Marcus sit cross-legged beside a row of young corn plants, close his eyes, and try to extend his awareness beyond his immediate physical senses. Do not try to think about the plants, she instructed, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead, try to feel them. Imagine that your mind is like a gentle breeze, touching everything around you without disturbing it. Marcus struggled with the concept at first. His human mind was used to analyzing and categorizing everything it encountered, breaking down complex problems into manageable pieces. The kind of holistic awareness that came naturally to her people required a different approach entirely. I can't feel anything, he said after several minutes of frustrated effort. You are trying too hard, Zara replied gently. Humans always want to grab onto things to control them, but this is about letting go, about becoming empty so that other things can fill you. She placed her hand lightly on his shoulder, and through their brief physical contact, she shared a glimpse of what she experienced when she opened her empathic senses. For just a moment, Marcus felt the slow pulse of life energy that surrounded them, the patient growth of the corn, the busy activity of insects in the soil, the vast network of root systems that connected the entire field in a living web. I felt it, he whispered, his eyes snapping open in amazement. For just a second, I felt what you feel. From that day forward, their relationship began to change. They worked together as partners rather than owner and former slave, combining his scientific knowledge with her natural abilities to create something neither could have achieved alone. The farm flourished under their joint care, producing yields that surprised even Marcus. But more than that, the emotional distance between them began to shrink. During their evening meals, they talked about their respective worlds, sharing stories of their childhoods and the families they had lost. Marcus told her about his daughter's fascination with alien cultures and how she had always dreamed of traveling to other worlds. Zara described the crystal cities of Lyrian Prime and the great libraries where her people preserved the wisdom of countless generations. She would have loved to meet someone like you, Marcus said one evening, his voice soft with memory. Anna always believed that the galaxy would be a better place when different species learned to understand each other. Perhaps she was right, Zara replied. Perhaps understanding is possible even between very different kinds of people. The first real test of that understanding came 6 weeks after her arrival, when a transport ship landed at the small spaceport in the nearby settlement. Zara was in town with Marcus, helping him sell some of their surplus crops at the weekly market. When they saw other Lyrians being herded off the ship in chains, Zara's empathic senses were immediately overwhelmed by the fear and despair radiating from her fellow refugees. Without thinking, she started toward them, but Marcus caught her arm. Don't, he said urgently. If they see you free and unrestrained, it will cause problems for both of us. Those are my people, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I cannot simply watch them be sold like animals. And if you get yourself recaptured, how does that help them? Or anyone else? The logic of his argument was undeniable, but watching her fellow Lyrians being processed for auction felt like a betrayal of everything she had ever believed about loyalty and community. The guilt was almost overwhelming. That night, unable to sleep, she found Marcus sitting on the porch, staring up at the stars. "I cannot stop thinking about them," she admitted, settling into the chair beside him. "Neither can I," he replied. "I've been wondering if there's something we could do." "What do you mean?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with some internal debate. Finally he spoke. "I have savings from my previous life, money I've never touched because I didn't know what to do with it. What if we bought some of them?" "You would do that?" "Not to own them," he said quickly. "To free them. To give them the same choice I gave you." Zara felt tears forming in her eyes, the first time she had cried since her capture. The depth of his compassion, his willingness to use his resources to help people he had never met, challenged every assumption she had ever made about human nature. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you sacrifice so much for strangers?" Marcus looked at her, and in the starlight she could see the pain and hope warring in his expression. "Because maybe Anna was right. Maybe this is how we make the galaxy a better place, one act of understanding at a time." As they sat together under the alien stars, planning their rescue mission, Zara realized that something profound had changed between them. They were no longer just two refugees sharing a temporary arrangement. They had become something more. Partners, friends, and perhaps the beginning of something that neither of their species had thought possible. The next auction was scheduled for 3 days later. Marcus spent the time liquidating some of his investments and preparing the legal documentation that would allow him to purchase multiple slaves. The process was disturbingly routine. The colonial government had streamlined the paperwork to encourage commerce, treating sentient beings like any other import commodity. "Are you certain about this?" Zara asked as they reviewed the financial transfers on his datapad. The amount he was prepared to spend represented most of his life savings. "You will have almost nothing left." Marcus looked up from the screen, his expression resolute. "Money doesn't bring back the dead, and it doesn't ease the guilt of surviving when others didn't. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do with it." They developed a careful plan. Marcus would attend the auction as a legitimate buyer, while Zara waited nearby with transport arrangements. They had rented a cargo hauler and prepared a temporary shelter in one of his unused barns. The goal was to purchase as many Lyrians as possible and then offer them the same choice he had given her: freedom to leave or the opportunity to stay and build new lives. The auction house was busier than before, with several wealthy colonists examining the latest shipment of alien slaves. Zara watched from a distance through the building's windows, her empathic senses reeling from the mixture of predatory anticipation from the buyers and terror from the captives. There were 8 Lyrians in the group, ranging from teenagers to elderly adults. All showed the telltale signs of recent trauma, the hollow look of beings who had watched their world burn and their families scattered to the winds. Zara recognized one of them, an older woman named Kira who had been a teacher in her home city. The bidding was fierce. Lyrians were considered exotic and desirable, their natural empathic abilities making them valuable as personal attendants and counselors for wealthy humans. Marcus bid carefully, trying not to draw attention to himself while still securing the purchases he needed. By the end of the auction, he had successfully bought 5 of the 8 Lyrians, including Kira. The financial cost was staggering, but he showed no regret as he completed the transactions. Watching him work, Zara felt a surge of admiration mixed with something deeper, a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced since losing her family. The transport to the farm was tense. The rescued Lyrians huddled together in the back of the cargo hauler, clearly expecting this to be another step in their degradation. They spoke to each other in hushed tones in their native language, trying to prepare themselves for whatever new horrors awaited them. Kira was the first to notice Zara. "Child?" she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "Is that truly you? We thought you were dead." "I am alive and free," Zara replied in their shared language, "and soon you will be too." The explanation took hours. Even with Zara translating and vouching for Marcus's intentions, the other Lyrians found it difficult to believe that any human would purchase slaves only to free them. Their recent experiences had taught them to expect cruelty and deception from their captors. It wasn't until Marcus personally removed each of their collars and handed them the keys to their own quarters that they began to accept the reality of their situation. The moment their empathic abilities returned, they were overwhelmed by the same shock that Zara had experienced, Marcus's genuine compassion and complete lack of malicious intent. "This human is unlike any we have encountered," Kira said to Zara in private later that evening. "His spirit carries great pain but no darkness. How did you come to trust him?" "Time," Zara replied simply. "And the recognition that pain can make people cruel or it can make them kind." He chose kindness. The integration of the new refugees into farm life was challenging but rewarding. Marcus had to expand his living facilities and adjust his agricultural plans to accommodate more workers. But the Lyrians brought skills and knowledge that complemented his scientific approach to farming. Their natural empathic connection to living things, combined with their advanced understanding of biological systems, created new possibilities for the farm's development. More importantly, the isolation that had defined Marcus's life for years was finally broken. The farmhouse that had once echoed with loneliness now hummed with conversation, laughter, and the sound of people building a community together. Evening meals became communal affairs where stories were shared and plans were made for the future. But it was during these community gatherings that Zara began to notice changes in her own feelings toward Marcus. She found herself watching him more carefully, paying attention to the way he interacted with others and the patience he showed when helping the newcomers adjust to their freedom. Her empathic abilities picked up on his emotions with increasing clarity, and what she sensed there made her heart race. He was falling in love with her. The realization came gradually, built from small moments and subtle emotional shifts that only her enhanced senses could detect. The way his pulse quickened when she entered a room, the warmth that flooded through him when she smiled, the careful way he avoided being alone with her, as if he was afraid of revealing feelings he considered inappropriate. The awareness created a complex tangle of emotions within her. Human Lyrian relationships were not unknown, but they were rare and often complicated by vast cultural differences. More challenging was the question of whether her own feelings were genuine attraction or simply gratitude mixed with the trauma bonding of shared survival. One evening, as they worked together in the greenhouse while the others prepared dinner, Zara decided to address the situation directly. "You have feelings for me," she said quietly, not looking up from the seedlings she was transplanting. Marcus froze, his hands stilling on the irrigation controls. "I'm sorry," he said after a long moment. "I know it's inappropriate. You were my slave, even if only technically, and there's a power imbalance that makes any such feelings wrong. I've been trying to do not apologize," Zara interrupted, finally meeting his eyes. "I simply wanted you to know that I am aware of them. My empathic abilities make it impossible for me to ignore strong emotions in others." "I never intended for this to happen," Marcus said, his voice filled with guilt. "I brought you here to save you, not to develop complications. What if the complications are not unwelcome?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure it was safe to cross. Marcus stared at her with a mixture of hope and fear that made her chest tight with sympathy. "Zara, you've been through incredible trauma. Your entire world has been destroyed. You've been enslaved and displaced, and I'm the only human you know who has shown you kindness. Any feelings you think you might have could just be psychological dependency, not genuine attraction." His words stung, partly because she had wondered the same thing herself. But as she examined her own emotions with the same careful attention she gave to the farm's plants, she realized there was something real growing there, something that went beyond gratitude or convenience. "You may be right," she said slowly, "but what if you are wrong? What if what I feel is real? And by protecting me from making what you consider a mistake, you are actually preventing something beautiful from growing." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, his emotions cycling through confusion, longing, and fear. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I don't know what the right thing to do is." "Then perhaps we should take time to discover it together," Zara suggested. "Not as former slave and owner, but as two people who have found something unexpected in the darkness." That night, as Zara lay in her bed listening to the sounds of the farm settling into sleep around her, she realized that her life had reached another turning point. She was no longer just a refugee seeking survival. She was a woman contemplating a future she had never imagined possible. The question now was whether she and Marcus could navigate the complex emotions between them and build something lasting from the ashes of their respective losses. The courtship that followed was unlike anything in either of their cultures. Lyrian relationships traditionally began with mental harmony, a gradual synchronization of thoughts and emotions that created deep understanding before physical attraction. Human courtship, as Zara understood it, often started with physical chemistry and worked toward emotional connection. What developed between her and Marcus was something entirely different. They began spending time together deliberately rather than by chance, taking evening walks through the fields or sitting together after dinner to discuss everything from agricultural techniques to philosophy. Marcus shared stories of human literature and history, while Zara taught him about Lyrian art and spiritual traditions. The conversations revealed how similar their core values were, despite coming from vastly different worlds. "Your people believe that consciousness is connected across space and time," Marcus said one evening as they watched the sunset from a hill overlooking the farm. "That individual minds are part of a larger universal intelligence." "Yes," Zara confirmed, settling beside him on the blanket they had brought. "We call it the Great Harmony. Every living thing contributes to it like instruments in an infinite orchestra. That is why empathic abilities are so important to us. They help us hear the music." "Humans have a similar concept," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "We call it different things. The collective unconscious, the universal human experience, the web of life. But the idea that we are all connected somehow is part of our philosophy too. Perhaps that is why we can understand each other," Zara suggested. "Despite the differences between our species, we both recognize that connection." During these conversations, Marcus was careful to maintain appropriate physical distance, but Zara could feel his internal struggle through her empathic senses. His attraction to her was growing stronger, but so was his determination not to take advantage of what he still saw as her vulnerable position. The breakthrough came when Kira, the eldest of the rescued Lyrians, approached Zara with concerns about the developing relationship. "Child," the older woman said during one of their private conversations, "the others are worried about your association with the human. While we are grateful for his kindness, mixing our bloodlines with theirs is a path that leads to complications." "What kind of complications?" Zara asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Cultural confusion for any offspring, rejection by both communities, the possibility that human aggression could emerge in children who cannot control it." Kira paused, studying Zara's face. "But more than that, we worry that you are confusing gratitude with love." The conversation forced Zara to examine her feelings more deeply than she had before. Was she truly attracted to Marcus as an individual, or was she simply responding to his kindness after experiencing so much cruelty? The question troubled her enough that she decided to seek clarity through meditation, a Lyrian practice that involved opening her empathic senses completely and examining her own emotional landscape with perfect honesty. What she discovered surprised her. Yes, there was gratitude in her feelings for Marcus, but it was only a small part of a much larger emotional structure. She admired his intelligence, his dedication to healing rather than harming, his willingness to sacrifice for others. She was attracted to his gentle strength and the way he treated all living things with respect. Most importantly, she felt a deep sense of compatibility with him, a recognition that they could build something meaningful together. Armed with this self-knowledge, she sought out Marcus the next evening and found him in his laboratory, analyzing soil samples under a microscope. "I need to tell you something," she said without preamble. He looked up, immediately sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" "I have been questioning my feelings for you, wondering if they are real or simply a response to trauma. I wanted to be certain before we continued down this path." Marcus set down his microscope and gave her his full attention. "And what did you discover?" "That my feelings for you are genuine," she said simply. "Not born from gratitude or dependency, but from real attraction and compatibility. I care for you as an individual, not as my rescuer." The relief that flooded through Marcus was so strong that Zara could feel it like a warm wave washing over her. But it was quickly followed by another emotion, fear. "Even if your feelings are real," he said carefully, "that doesn't resolve all the complications. We are different species with different lifespans. Different biological needs, different cultural expectations. The challenges would be enormous. Yes, they would be, Zara agreed. But consider this. When you rescued me and the others, you did not let the challenges stop you from doing what you believed was right. When you chose to trust me with your grief and loneliness, you did not let fear prevent you from taking that risk. Why should love be different? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the decision. Finally, he spoke. Because if we try this and it fails, it won't just hurt us. It will affect the entire community we are building here. The other Lyrians look to you for guidance, and the human colonists already view this farm with suspicion because of how many aliens I have living here. And if we do not try, Zara countered, we will spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been possible. That night, Marcus called a meeting with all the farm's residents. The group had grown to include not just the rescued Lyrians, but also 2 human refugees who had heard about the community and asked to join. The diversity of the group was striking. Different species, backgrounds, and experiences all united by their shared commitment to building something better than what they had lost. I want to discuss something that affects all of us, Marcus began, his nervousness evident in his voice. Zara and I have developed feelings for each other that go beyond friendship. Before we decide how to proceed, we want to hear your thoughts and concerns. The discussion that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Some of the Lyrians worried about the implications of interspecies relationships for their cultural identity. The humans questioned whether such a relationship could ever be truly equal, given the history between their species. But gradually a consensus began to emerge. What matters, Kira said finally, is not whether your relationship fits traditional patterns, but whether it contributes to the harmony we are trying to create here. If your love helps build the community rather than dividing it, then it serves the greater good. We have all come here seeking something better than what we left behind, added Tam, one of the human refugees. Maybe that includes new ways of forming families and communities that cross the old boundaries. The conversation continued late into the night, but by the end, the group had reached a decision. They would support Marcus and Zara's relationship as long as it remained healthy and contributed to the farm's mission of creating a sanctuary for refugees from across the galaxy. 3 months later, Marcus and Zara were married in a ceremony that blended traditions from both their cultures. The ritual took place in the farm's main field at sunset, with the entire community gathered to witness their vows. Kira performed the Lyrian blessing of mental harmony, while Tam officiated the human elements of the ceremony. I promise to honor your differences as well as our similarities, Marcus said, as they exchanged the simple rings he had crafted in his workshop, to learn from your wisdom while sharing my own, and to build with you a future that neither of our peoples has imagined before. I promise to trust in our connection despite the challenges we will face, Zara replied, her voice steady despite the tears flowing down her cheeks. To bring the best of my heritage to our union while embracing the best of yours, and to prove that love can bridge any distance between worlds. The celebration that followed was joyous but modest, with music and food that reflected the diverse backgrounds of their community. As the evening progressed and the guests gradually retired to their homes, Marcus and Zara found themselves alone under the stars that had witnessed so much change in their lives. No regrets? Marcus asked softly as they swayed together to music only they could hear. None, Zara replied, her empathic senses confirming the truth of her words. This feels right in ways I cannot fully explain. Looking up at the night sky, she thought about how far she had traveled from the crystal cities of her birth world. The journey had been painful and traumatic, but it had led her to something she could never have found at home. A love that transcended the boundaries her people had thought insurmountable. As they walked hand in hand back to the farmhouse they now shared, Zara realized that her story was no longer about survival or recovery. It had become something much more hopeful, a testament to the possibility of finding beauty and connection even in the darkest circumstances. 2 years after their wedding, the farm had transformed into something far beyond Marcus's original vision. What had started as a simple agricultural operation had become a thriving refuge community that attracted beings from across the galaxy. The success of their integrated farming techniques, combining human science with Lyrian empathic abilities, had produced crop yields that caught the attention of agricultural researchers throughout the sector. But more importantly, word had spread about a place where former slaves could find not just freedom, but genuine acceptance and the opportunity to rebuild their lives. The community now housed 37 residents representing 12 different species, each bringing unique skills and perspectives to their shared endeavor. Zara stood in the expanded greenhouse, her hands resting on her rounded belly as she monitored the latest batch of hybrid plants. The pregnancy had been unexpected. Interspecies reproduction between humans and Lyrians was rare but not impossible. The medical scans showed that their child was developing normally, displaying characteristics of both species in fascinating combinations. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked as he joined her among the growing plants. Even after 2 years of marriage, she could feel his wonder and joy every time he looked at her carrying their child. "Strong," she replied honestly. "The baby seems to thrive on the same life energy that feeds these plants. I can sense its awareness growing every day." Marcus placed his hand gently over hers on her belly, and for a moment they shared a perfect moment of connection. Husband, wife, and the new life they had created together. Through her empathic abilities, Zara could feel the complex emotions swirling through Marcus. Love for her and their unborn child, amazement at how much their lives had changed, and a deep sense of purpose that had replaced the aimless grief he had carried for so long. "The delegation from the Colonial Council arrives tomorrow," Marcus reminded her, though she could sense his reluctance to discuss politics during such a peaceful moment. The visit was the result of their community's growing influence and success. Several colonial governments had expressed interest in replicating their model, while others viewed their interspecies integration with suspicion. The delegation was supposed to be a fact-finding mission, but Zara's empathic senses had detected undercurrents of hostility from some of the advance representatives. "They are afraid of what we represent," she said softly. "Change always frightens those who profit from existing systems." "The slave trade is still legal in most of the outer colonies," Marcus agreed grimly. "A community of free-former slaves working together successfully challenges the narrative that some species are naturally inferior to others." That evening, the community gathered for their weekly council meeting to discuss preparations for the visit. The group had developed sophisticated democratic processes that honored the cultural traditions of all species while still enabling effective decision-making. Kira, now serving as the elected spokesperson for the Lyrian residents, raised the primary concern on everyone's mind. "Our intelligence sources suggest that some members of the delegation may be looking for excuses to declare our community a threat to colonial stability." "What kind of threat could we possibly represent?" asked Vel, a Zephyrian refugee whose species communicated primarily through color changes in their skin. The question came through the translation device they all wore, but their skin patterns showed genuine confusion, "The kind that comes from proving inconvenient truths," replied Dr. Sarah Chen, a human xenobiologist who had joined the community to study their agricultural innovations. Despite sharing a surname with Marcus, they were not related. Chen was simply a common name among the Chinese colonists. If former slaves can create thriving communities, it becomes harder to justify keeping slavery legal. The discussion that followed was intense but measured. They knew they were walking a delicate line between growing their influence and attracting the wrong kind of attention from powerful interests that profited from the existing order. "Cannot hide what we have built here," Marcus said finally, "but we can be strategic about how we present it. We emphasize the agricultural innovations, the economic benefits, and the peaceful integration. We downplay the political implications." The next morning, 3 sleek government shuttles descended onto the landing pad they had constructed at the edge of their property. The delegation consisted of 12 officials representing various colonial governments, trade organizations, and regulatory bodies. Zara could immediately sense the complex web of emotions among the visitors: curiosity, skepticism, fear, and in some cases outright hostility. The tour began with the agricultural facilities, where Marcus and Dr. Chen demonstrated the revolutionary farming techniques they had developed. The combination of human technology and Lyrian life sense had produced crops that were more nutritious, more resistant to disease, and more adaptable to varying climate conditions than anything previously achieved. The applications for food security across the colonies could be transformative, explained Dr. Chen as she showed yield comparisons on her datapad. "We are already seeing requests for technical consultation from 17 different worlds." Delegate Harrison from the Mars Industrial Consortium seemed particularly interested in the economic aspects. What about labor costs? Surely maintaining this level of agricultural sophistication requires significant investment in skilled workers. Actually, our labor costs are remarkably low, Marcus replied carefully. When workers have a stake in the community's success and genuine investment in the outcome, productivity increases dramatically, while compensation needs can be met through profit sharing rather than traditional wages. Zara watched the delegates' reactions carefully through her empathic senses. Some were genuinely impressed by the innovations and community structure. Others were clearly calculating how they might exploit or co-opt what they saw. But a few radiated the kind of cold hostility that suggested they viewed the community as a direct threat to their interests. The most troubling presence was Delegate Vorthak Prime Commander Skith, a reptilian being whose species had been heavily involved in the slave trade. His emotions were carefully shielded, but Zara could sense the barely contained rage beneath his diplomatic facade. Interesting that so many former workers have chosen to remain in this location, Skith hissed as they toured the residential areas. One might wonder if they truly understand their options for relocation. Every resident is here by choice, Zara replied firmly. We have assisted dozens of individuals with transportation to other locations when they wish to leave, but many find that they prefer the community we have built together. That evening, the delegation attended a community dinner where they could observe the natural interactions between residents. The meal was a celebration of their diverse cultures, with dishes and traditions from a dozen different worlds represented on the tables. Watching the easy camaraderie between species that had historically been enemies, seeing children playing together regardless of their biological origins, and witnessing the genuine affection between her and Marcus, several of the delegates began to reconsider their preconceptions. This is remarkable, admitted Delegate Torres from the Educational Council. The level of integration and cooperation here exceeds anything I have seen in established colonial cities. But as the evening progressed, tensions began to surface. Skith questioned several of the former slaves aggressively about their real reasons for staying, clearly looking for evidence of coercion or manipulation. Other delegates made pointed comments about the unnaturalness of interspecies relationships and the potential problems of hybrid offspring. The breaking point came when one delegate directly challenged Zara about her marriage to Marcus. Do you really believe that a relationship between such different species can produce stable offspring? Are you not concerned about condemning your child to a life of biological and social confusion? The question was clearly intended to provoke an emotional response, but Zara drew upon her years of diplomatic training to remain calm. I believe that diversity strengthens rather than weakens communities, she replied evenly. Our child will have the opportunity to learn from multiple cultural traditions and will grow up in a community that values individuals for their contributions rather than their species' origin. As she spoke, she felt Marcus's hand slip into hers, and the surge of supportive love from both him and the surrounding community members gave her the strength to continue. Moreover, she added, her voice growing stronger, this community is proof that cooperation between species is not just possible, but beneficial for everyone involved. We have created something here that serves as a model for what the galaxy could become if we chose understanding over fear. The silence that followed her words was broken by spontaneous applause from the community members, and several of the delegates joined in. Not all of them. Skith and a few others maintained their hostile silence, but enough to suggest that their message was being heard. Later that night, as they prepared for bed in their modest home, Marcus and Zara reflected on the day's events. Some of them will support us, Zara said as she settled against his shoulder. I could feel their minds opening to new possibilities.